This week on Louisiana Unfiltered, a case that has taken years to unfold. A Baton Rouge police officer was fired over an incident nearly 4 years ago. A judge later ruled he did nothing wrong. But the First Circuit Court of Appeal reversed that decision, reinstating his guilty conviction. That same judge, now suspended for multiple misconduct allegations herself. And just this week, the Louisiana Supreme Court weighed in, refusing to review the case, effectively upholding the officer's conviction. We're talking about Donald Steele, a former officer accused of abusing his badge to intimidate a teenager, forcing her to a remote location after taking her number during a traffic stop. It's a case that raises serious questions about justice, accountability, and power. This is Louisiana Unfiltered. Welcome back, everybody. We are going to work on a case today that is almost 4 years old. In fact, the case started back in June of 2021. So let me kind of fill you in on the basics of this. And the reason we're talking about this is just this past Tuesday on February the 25th. The Supreme Court ruled that a conviction for malfeasance in office against a fired Baton Rouge police officer will stand. What does malfeasance in office mean for a police officer? Well, once you have been convicted of that, you cannot be post-certified. In order to be a police officer in Louisiana, you have to be post-certified. And when that certification is revoked due to malfeasance in office, you can't be an officer in Louisiana. I covered this case for a very long time, and I can even tell you that the victim in this case, who back then was 19 years old, so fast forward 4 years, she's 23, her and her parents' only request was that they did not want this guy to be a police officer ever again. So let's kind of start filling you in on the basics. The officer's name is Donald Steele. It is June 2021, June 23rd, 2021. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning. A 19-year-old is driving down Burbank Drive, and she gets pulled over by a police officer, Donald Steele, for a possible DWI. During that stop, Steele is accused of inappropriately touching the teenager, forcing her to follow him to an isolated location in exchange that he will not ticket her. So he's on duty, but he's out of the area where he should be working in. So let me explain that a little bit. The way that the city kind of falls apart is that there are 4 or 5 different districts. So an officer is assigned to work a specific district. So say if you're assigned to work the 3rd district, then you need to be in only what is deemed to be that area. What we learned in trial was that Donald Steele actually ended up going to his house for a quick minute, and then when he's leaving, he decides to make this stop. Where he stopped this young lady, he was not within his district. I tell you all that because that played a crucial part during trial, and all of that came to light during trial. So let's fast forward. That was June. Now it's August of 2021. It takes Baton Rouge police nearly 2 months to finally end up arresting one of their own. So August 25th, 2021, Steele's arrested. He's charged with 2 felonies, second-degree kidnapping and malfeasance in office. But those are the felonies. He also gets arrested for a misdemeanor sexual battery. He is placed on paid administrative leave. Here is what kind of piqued Unfiltered with Kiran's interest back in 2022, that he stayed on paid administrative leave for an entire year. Administrative leave basically means that the admins at a police department or in any agency, sheriff's office, state police, any agency, that they are investigating what exactly happened because they don't know if the officer is in the wrong or not. Any standard procedure, you placed the law enforcement officer on leave, and it's paid leave while you continue your investigation. However, 1 whole year of being on leave, it's basically being able to sit at home and get paid to do your entire job. But then the other thing that our investigation ended up finding was that he was able to go through his certification for post. And if you are post certified, you actually get a little bit of a supplement on your paycheck. Somehow he was able to go to the range and qualify, and he was also continuing to get that monthly supplement. I believe August of 2022, we do a very in-depth investigation. In fact, guys, what we're going to do is something we've never done this before, but I kind of want you to take a listen because we did such an in-depth report back then. We spoke to the district attorney. We spoke to a police chief on whether it was normal to be on paid administrative leave for an entire year. We also tried to get a response from the then Baton Rouge police chief, Murphy Paul. Take a listen to our investigation. Should a police officer be on administrative leave for an entire year? That is the question when it comes to Baton Rouge police officer Donald Steele. And is he legally receiving a supplemental pay monthly, $500? We'll let you decide all of that. He is on leave for an alleged sexual harassment case where he pulled over a teenager for a DWI a year ago now. It was around 2 a.m. on June 23, 2021, when a 19-year-old was driving down Burbank Drive.
My client was leaving her apartment to go to a friend's house. Shortly thereafter, leaving her apartment, she was pulled over by Baton Rouge Police Officer Donald Steele.
Baton Rouge Police Officer Donald Steele stopped the teen for a possible DWI.
Donald Steele began a typical traffic stop, but then nothing typical happened after she was stopped.
Ron Haley is representing the female, whose name Unfiltered with Kiran is choosing not to publish.
He asked her if she was drinking that night. She said she had a drink, or maybe it was a shot. And he said, well, listen, I can, take you to jail for a DWI, but I'm not because you're pretty.
That's when Haley says Steele told her, quote, too many people know him out here, so they needed to move. Afraid to disobey an officer and threatened with an arrest, the 19-year-old did as she was told. Followed Steele to an empty warehouse near Hollywood Casino. It's where Haley alleges the following.
She remained there with him for about an hour and a half. During that time, there was multiple innuendos made by Mr. Steele towards my client. Mr. Steele kissed my client without her consent. Mr. Steele touched my client without her consent. Mr. Steele exchanged phone numbers with my client without her consent. At some point, my client was allowed to go home. Mr. Steele told my client that he wanted to come over earlier that morning.
Haley provided a copy of those text messages to Unfiltered with Kiran, where Steele allegedly texted the Southern University teen several harassing and inappropriate sexual comments.
But when you're ready for me to come, leave door unlocked, go back to the bed, take panties off, lick 2 fingers and rub in a circle motion on your Hey, can I come now? Have a good day at work. Morning. Hey, are you having a good day? I got some money for you to get your nails and toes done.
After that, she reached out to Ron Haley, asking him to represent her. Haley said they were able to affirm her story by backtracking Steele's whereabouts on June 23rd.
Even though he turned off his body cam and dash cam, his radio was still on. And we learned that the exact route that my client said they went on, it tracked by his GPS and his walkie-talkie.
August 25th, 2021, nearly 2 months since the alleged incident, Steele was arrested and charged with 2 felonies. second-degree kidnapping, and malfeasance in office, plus a misdemeanor, sexual battery. Do you think, had you not gotten involved, maybe an arrest would not have been made?
I think it's quite possible.
That started the possible criminal proceedings. Before that, though, the Baton Rouge Police Department launched an internal affairs investigation and, per procedure, put Steele on paid administrative leave, meaning the taxpayers are paying his salary while Steele is ordered to remain at home. Fast forward 1 year, Steele allegedly remains on administrative leave.
As far as this admin leave, this is unprecedented in my experience to have somebody on admin leave for essentially a year.
Greg Ferries is a former Baton Rouge police chief who helped explain some of the department's procedures, such as paid admin leave.
That is typically done for a few days so that the chief and his internal affairs investigators can determine to their satisfaction whether there's merit to the accusation against the officer. I think someone that's on admin leave for essentially a year, as I read the law, they would not qualify to receive that pay.
The pay Ferries is referring to is the Louisiana State Supplemental Pay. It's an additional $500 officers can receive monthly on top of their salary. The state supplements the $500 for enforcing state laws. However, in order to receive it, the officer must be post-certified and maintain an up-to-date firearms qualification, meaning you need to qualify with your department-issued gun and go through a week-long training called in-service. Per BRPD's policy, when an officer is placed on leave, the department strips the officer of his or her police car, badge, radio, gun, and much more. According to records obtained by Unfiltered with Kiran, Steele, however, was allowed to return to the Baton Rouge PD range on February 25, 2022 for his firearms qualifications. In fact, sources said special accommodations were made so Steele could go to the range, be given his gun to qualify, return the gun, and then leave. Mind you, this happened while Steele was on admin leave and awaiting prosecution on felony charges. Having an updated firearms qualification likely meant Steele could continue receiving supplemental pay. However, if an officer is on administrative leave, does he qualify for supplemental pay?
Supplemental pay, per the law, is for people who are doing active police work enforcing laws.
That law is this specific Louisiana revised statute that reads people who shall not be entitled to additional pay out of state funds, includes people who work purely clerical or non-enforcement duties. When an officer is on leave with no police car, gun, or radio, he or she cannot enforce the laws, meaning the supplemental pay needs to pause. Records here show Steele has been receiving supplemental pay every month this year, as recently as June 30th, and the man approving that pay? Baton Rouge Police Chief Murphy Paul.
The authorization for officers to receive state pay is what's called a pay warrant signed by the chief, who certifies that the people on that list, the officers on that list, have performed their duties in compliance with the state supplemental pay law.
Meaning if an officer should not receive supplemental pay, the chief should not sign off. But a look at all these payments for Donald Steele shows the first signature approving the pay is Chief Murphy Paul, followed by Mayor President Sharon Weston Broom certifying the pay.
I think taxpayers should be upset at that again, additional taxpayer monies are going to pay an officer that was arrested for doing something illegal while he was on the job.
Back to the being on administrative leave for an entire year, Haley says the delay is from the district attorney's office.
What we're waiting on is a decision from the DA's office as to whether or not Mr. Steele is going to be prosecuted or not.
So the matter is still under review, but we expect some decisions here fairly soon. We had a little bit of COVID setback, but we also had some further investigation that we asked to be conducted. That has been conducted. There's a few other things that we are going to do, but that won't take much time, and we anticipate that we'll be moving forward with charges in one way or the other.
Moore said because it's a high-profile case involving a police officer, he wants to ensure the case is solid. But Haley says they're not asking for guilt or innocence right now. They simply need to know whether there's enough evidence to move forward with criminal charges for second-degree kidnapping, malfeasance in office, and misdemeanor sexual battery.
This is a case that we are considering taken to a grand jury. Has not made that decision yet. Those charges don't require a grand jury, but this is one just based on our review that we may wish to go to a grand jury.
It certainly raises questions in my mind as to why these serious allegations have not been resolved one way or the other. If they are true, it certainly merits very, very serious discipline, and if it's not true, if he's been wrongly accused, he needs to be returned to work for his sake.
Haley's client filed a protective order against Steele, claiming Steele was allegedly stalking her and had sexually assaulted her. Nearly a year later, Haley's client's protective order could potentially now be in jeopardy. BRPD is waiting on the criminal proceedings before the internal affairs investigation. But is that normal?
I can see a possible reason for it, but in my opinion, you can't delay it for this amount of time. It needed to be resolved a long time ago, and it certainly needs to be resolved now.
So you may ask, why does it appear Steele is getting preferential treatment? Steele is a member of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity, the same fraternity of which Myron Daniels is a member. Daniels is the deputy chief over internal affairs. Evidence points towards Chief Paul also being a member of the same fraternity. It's why I've repeatedly requested an interview with Chief Paul.
Are you going to comment and interview at all with me?
I'm sorry?
Are you going to interview with me at all?
I told you go through the PIO. You know the procedure.
I've gone through the PIO, and the PIO tells me, Chief, that they need to wait on you to respond. So I'm confused what's happening here.
Well, what's happening is there's a process, and you have to go through the process. As you well know, just like the advocate right there is asking for an interview, and so are others, you have to go through the process.
I've done that.
After being denied repeatedly, it's why I asked the chief on camera for an interview after a civil service hearing. However, he kept walking and refused to answer.
Chief, can I talk to you? Are you just not going to talk to me at all? Are we ever going to interview about anything? Chief, why not interview with me?
Take it. Thank you. That's okay.
Are you a member of a fraternity? Chief, you just talked about how all officers should be disciplined.
He never did answer if he's a member of the fraternity. Until this day, the chief refuses to interview. What do you feel is the message that is being sent when you have an officer such as Donald Steele and all the allegations against him still a police officer?
I think it sends a bad message that you could basically get away with anything without having any real consequence. You could do something so egregious that leads to you being arrested, but yet you're still allowed to not necessarily have the badge, but you still have the benefits of that badge. You're still getting paid by the taxpayers.
Donald Steele's attorney, Franz Beauregard, did issue a statement. My client, Mr. Steele, is on paid administrative leave with the Baton Rouge Police Department, and issues in regards to his compensation should be addressed through BRPD. Now, we did try that, but the police chief did not respond to our request for any comment. However, the lawyer for the police department did, saying I am a freelance reporter, and that means I am another member of the general public, unless otherwise designated by the chief of police himself. As of yet, my designation is not media, per the chief himself. Meanwhile, a date has not been set yet for if and when this case goes before a grand jury. With Unfiltered with Kiran, I'm Kiran Chawla. They ended up getting an indictment. So after our investigating, the grand jury chose to indict him. And we happen to be right outside as the district attorney, Hiller Moore, as well as the attorney for the victim, spoke to the media. Same thing. I want you to be able to take a listen to it.
Surely he's been on the Brady list since the allegations came about, just like others that we get that have allegations against. And so now obviously he remains on that list, and now we have an indictment. And so I think we had very few cases maybe with him at this point, but he surely is on that list. And with the indictment today for second-degree kidnapping, malfeasance in office, serious charges, serious allegations, and just really want to commend the survivor in this case. This is a young lady who endured a lot at the hands of officials, and came forward. It's taken some time for us to get here. It's a long road, but she's been a survivor. She's credible. We support her. The Baton Rouge Police Department did an outstanding job investigating this and providing us the information to get here today. Obviously, he's presumed innocent like anyone else, and we take that presumption seriously. We take our job seriously, and this is the case that we will proceed forward and seek justice like we would in any other case.
We know malfeasance is a felony, but is the second-degree kidnapping a felony in this situation as well?
Both are felony offenses. There was also the possibility of a sexual battery, but it was a misdemeanor sexual battery. So malfeasance is a felony, carries 0 to 5 years. And then second-degree kidnapping is a much more serious offense, carries 5 to 40 years, and 2 of those years have to be without benefit, probation, parole, suspension of sentence. So, yeah, extremely serious case.
If convicted, how much time is he facing?
Well, 5 to 40 years by statute for second-degree kidnapping, and then 0 to 5 for malfeasance, and at least a minimum of 2 years.
Do you think this guy has any job being employed by Baton Rouge Police still?
Absolutely. I have no doubt that the chief, now knowing that the grand jury's returned what they return, will take action based on this grand jury return. I have no doubt whatsoever.
Listen, we appreciate the District Attorney's Office today for believing in our client, believing in this strong and incredible young woman. It is a jarring thing to relive what she did over and over again. But today, I believe that this was a great sign of things to come, that the grand jury of this great parish saw what we saw, saw a victim.
What message does this send the taxpayers that he's still employed and has been on the payroll for the last year?
I think at this point, the ball's back in their court. A lot of we're waiting on to see what the District Attorney's Office was going to do. And today, the District Attorney's Office has spoken. They sought some very serious charges on behalf of Officer Steele. The grand jury believed that there was probable cause for those charges. And at this point, I think responsibly, we need to demand for his resignation or his termination.
Have you spoken to her, and how's she feeling?
Relieved. I did speak with her. I walked up with her this morning before she went and testified. While I was in court, we shared a text message. I told her I was very proud of her. She thanked me for believing in her and wants to thank the grand jurors for believing in her too.
What has this done to her?
I mean, this is going to affect her forever. This is going to affect how she views relationships going forward. She is still in counseling. She's been in counseling consistently since this has happened. She has switched counselors, just trying to get that comfort, just trying to create a new normal for herself. But it's never going to be exactly the same. This sends a message, though, for women out there that you can speak up and people will believe you.
Can you run through again? I know not to belabor the point, you had told us everything that he had done a year ago. But again, what did he do that led to the kidnapping charge and obviously malfeasance charge because he was on the clock?
Well, listen, as it relates to the kidnapping charge, the way I see it is this. He used his influence as a police officer and threatened her and said, listen, if you don't follow me, XYZ is going to happen. And the XYZ, of course, is she would have been arrested. So based on that, I think that's how you get the kidnapping charge. The malfeasance, look, you're doing all this stuff while you're on the clock. That is, you're supposed to be protecting and serving, not serving your own personal interests, which I believe at that night he was trying to do.
Do you think this is the first time he did that?
We have been contacted by people since to say that there's been other, questionable behavior, but nobody's come out publicly and said this person, he did this to me on this particular day.
What's next?
Next, he'll be arraigned. At some point, a notice of arraignment will go out to him and his attorney. He will answer the charges in court. I'm assuming he's going to plead not guilty to the charges and the criminal process goes forward. As it relates to our civil litigation, I have to contact the city attorney's office to see how we're going to navigate this. Typically speaking, there are stays that are put into place while a criminal investigation is going on. They do not allow us to subsequently go forward without civil investigation. However, I will reach out to the parish attorney's office to see if we can at least initiate some sort of discovery going forward to the state, so her case just isn't stalemated while Mr. Steele goes through the criminal process.
Does this add validity to your civil claim, considering the fact that your civil suit was filed before the criminal charges?
Oh, I think it absolutely does. I think we could double down on that. That, listen, we believed her from day one. From day one, from the moment we saw a social media post and we had a chance to sit down with her and her family, we believed her. Today is a validation for this young lady. Today is a validation for all women, I think, who have been faced with a situation like this, who have decided to be silent because they were afraid that they weren't going to be heard, or if they were heard, nobody will listen and take action. Today, action was taken. I think as it relates to our civil case, I think it definitely strengthens our civil case. Chris and everyone, you guys know, we take on a lot of civil rights cases throughout the state, and oftentimes we don't even get an arrest, even though we're able to be successful in civil court. In this particular case, not only do we get an arrest, but we have an indictment. And again, we want to thank the district attorney's office for believing in our client, for bringing what we believe was a strong case to the grand jury. And we'd like to thank the grand jurors for the main thing, believing in this incredibly strong young lady.
Does the protective order remain in place now that he's been formally charged?
Yes, I believe that does. Now that's formal charge, it would be a violation of bond if he were to contact her. I did not see anything in the record that his attorney filed for a 701, any type of bond relief, so that would stay in place.
And just to clarify, he's already been charged with these charges, but the grand jury made it formal today.
Yes, so he was arrested for the charges, but now the grand jury has decided that formal prosecution by the hands of the East Baton Rouge Parish District Attorney's Office will go forward.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anything else you want to say? You didn't get to say.
I'm so glad for her. Good for her. That if I had to leave with one message, because look, it takes a lot to be in the public with something like this, and although she has not come out publicly and spoken anything as her rights, other than a social media post, but this is something that's been weighing on her and her family. So the last message I want to say, good for her. Good for her.
Thank you, Ron.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
A grand jury indicted Donald Steele on second-degree kidnapping and malfeasance in office. An indictment basically means that a grand jury feels there is enough evidence to proceed with charges and even to a trial. So soon after the grand jury comes down with their indictment, hours later, Donald Steele is fired from the Baton Rouge Police Department. Mind you, this entire time he had been on paid administrative leave. So there's the question of, well, should he have, this case should have probably happened a lot sooner, and he got away with about a year's worth of pay, that is tax dollars. And so the case eventually is allotted to a trial. So this is kind of really where the story gets started. March of 2024, he goes to trial. So anytime someone is up in trial, you have the choice of if you want to go to trial with a jury, meaning 12 different people will hear your case and they will decide your fate, or you can opt to have a bench trial. A bench trial means that the judge will serve as the judge and the jury. Well, from everything that we have learned, we were told that Donald Steele was actually advised by his own lawyers, do not do a bench trial. He chose to do a bench trial with Judge Ebony Johnson Rose. She is one of the criminal judges for the 19th Judicial District in Baton Rouge. There's a reason I tell you all of this, especially the part that his own attorney advised him not to do a bench trial. It's one of those that it's like conversations that happen behind closed doors, perhaps, that, nope, this is what you want to do. So a trial is put on for several days, and I remember covering all of this. They had officers come testify. The witness, the victim herself, got up on the stand very bravely. Mind you, she was 19 at that time, so she's now, at this time, 22 years old. Imagine being 22 and you've been through this incident, but it takes everything in you to get up on that stand. And the defense is going to ask you all sorts of questions that, hey, maybe you put yourself in that position. Maybe you did this. Maybe you did that. But this young lady was so brave. And I guess let me back up just a tad bit and give you a little more detail as to what happened. The reason some of this information is known is that we spoke to the lawyer for the victim, plus there was body camera footage from the officer that was played in court. So he pulls over this young girl at 19 years old. He says that, hey, I suspect you've been drinking and driving, a DWI. And she's like, no, nothing like that. She had already texted a friend that she's on her way, a guy, that she was on her way. And obviously she's not showing up to his place and he hasn't heard from her. So he's starting to get a little concerned because he doesn't know what's happening. Donald Steele pulls over this young lady and he basically starts, according to her lawyer, touching her, inappropriately touching her, kissing her, even took her phone from her and put his phone number in there. Which, what? And kept her there for a while, but then said that there are too many people here. Let's go to a different location. And in fact, at that very first location, they even had a LSU police officer came and testified that an LSU officer saw that a Baton Rouge police officer had stopped somebody kind of in their area or right on the line of where LSU PD starts and ends, or ends, should I say, and BRPD starts. They stopped by and said, officer, is everything okay? And the officer ended up telling them, oh, it's just my sister. So a lot of things just did not add up. And after that, he tells her that, hey, I need you to follow me. There are too many people here. So he takes her to kind of a more remote area, more isolated area. And that's where he kept her for a while, put his phone number in her phone. And then she's allowed to eventually go home. Obviously, there's that threat of, hey, I'm a police officer. If you allow all this, I'm not going to ticket you. You're a beautiful young lady. Those kind of conversations are allegedly what happened. She goes home, and then she got some very, very, very vulgar text messages from him. Text messages that I'm not going to repeat. They're in our original report. You can go back and watch them, but I'll just summarize some of them for you, such as like, hey, open the door at so and so time. Make sure you're doing this to yourself when I come in, whatnot. And he repeatedly was like, hello, 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 hello. And she did not answer. So there's zero interest from this young lady. I believe it was the very next day that she and her parents went and filed a report with the Baton Rouge Police Department. That is why there was a question of why did it take 2 months for him to be arrested after this incident unfolded. So during court, she got up there and testified. I believe her parents, or at least her mom, got up there, but I remember watching her parents sitting in court and crying. Number one, they're proud of their child, but number two, it's hard to listen to all that she endured and went through that day. Again, I think I told you that a officer testified that he was assigned to work a specific district. He was out of his area. This specific call was never called in. When an officer makes a stop, they always call it in and say, hey, I'm stopping so-and-so for this, and I'm at this location. There is no record of this specific stop. So all of these witnesses testify. The defense, obviously, Franz Borgard, he puts on his case and defends his client. And in the end, the Judge Ebony Johnson Rose, ends up saying that the kidnapping charge doesn't stand, that she wasn't kidnapped. She voluntarily followed him to that remote location. Yes, she drove there herself, but she was scared that he's a police officer. So is he going to do something? Is he going to end up arresting me if I don't follow him? So she followed him. But the judge said, nope, there is not enough evidence to move forward with finding Donald Steele guilty of kidnapping. So that's dropped. The sexual battery, they said that there was none of that. So what does that leave? Malfeasance in office. I still remember sitting in court and I'm sitting there writing as fast as I can. And I remember writing misdemeanor malfeasance in office. And I'm thinking, what is misdemeanor malfeasance in office? There is no such charge as a misdemeanor malfeasance in office in Louisiana. That charge is only a felony. So, of course, we write it, we report it, we put it out, and people who are familiar with the system, officers, lawyers, they're kind of coming at us that you have your information incorrect. That's not a possible charge. Like, she found him guilty of something that doesn't even exist. So after making some calls, we find out that, Yes, that is correct. The judge ended up finding him guilty of a charge that doesn't exist. Malfeasance in office is only a felony. So a few days later, we go back to court. All parties come back to court. And because there's this error, the judge clears him of any and all wrongdoing. Imagine being that victim. And I keep saying that over and over and over because she sat right next to me in court. And she's already cried to put herself through this. She's cried to be brave enough to get on that stand. Now she's crying that, why did I even do all of this? What was the purpose of all of this? Hiller Moore, who's the district attorney, and his assistant prosecutor, Dana Cummings, they're livid. They're absolutely livid. So they go to their office and they start working on an appeal. But they didn't rush that appeal. They took their time and wrote down every single detail that was presented in court. They appealed it to the First Circuit Court of Appeal. And this is something I actually would like to read to you. It took the First Circuit Court of Appeal about 3 months to kind of deliver their ruling. And when they did, they said they reversed Judge Johnson's ruling and said that the conviction now stands. So now he is found guilty of malfeasance in office. The First Circuit Court of Appeal took 3 months to render their response. That response was that they were going to overturn Judge Rose's ruling, and they were now going to find Donald Steele guilty of malfeasance in office. And I want to read to you the ruling that they said. We now conclude the trial court abused its discretion in granting the judgment of acquittal. The trial court found the defendant guilty, and then it talks about the specific law. Then later, on a subsequent court date, decided to change the guilty verdict to not guilty. Accordingly, the April 18th, 2024 ruling is reversed. The conviction of malfeasance in office is reinstated, and this matter is remanded for further proceedings. So this is kind of where the case comes back full circle to this week. His lawyers, Franz Beauregard, they say that we're going to appeal. So in order to appeal, because you got to remember, district court happens first. If you don't like their ruling, you appeal it to the First Circuit Court of Appeal. You don't like their ruling, the highest you can go is the Louisiana Supreme Court. So Franz Beauregard appeals it to the Louisiana Supreme Court. And they basically ask the Supreme Court, hey, can you go back and review what the First Circuit Court of Appeal came out with? Well, that's what came out this Tuesday, that the Supreme Court ruled, or they basically denied that request. They're not even going to look at what the First Circuit Court of Appeal did because they basically claim that they are in the right. That is where we kind of stand now. Donald Steele, his conviction for malfeasance in office at this point stands. This also kind of goes back to what I was saying as far as the post-certification. If you look at the law for Louisiana, in order to be post-certified, there are certain almost requirements, and the certification can be revoked at certain times as well. One of those is that if a person has ever been convicted of malfeasance in office, because of that, his post-certification, if he even had an active one, would be revoked. And in order to be an officer in Louisiana, you must be post-certified. So at the end of the day, the victim kind of still got what she wanted, that she did not want him to be a police officer ever again. She understood that the judge was not going to charge the officer with the kidnapping or the sexual battery. And she kind of came to terms with that. But her main request was that she did not want anybody else to go through what she went through. That who's to say he becomes an officer in another small community? And what if he were to try to abuse his badge again? And she finally got what she wanted. Donald Steele cannot be an officer. And in fact, just while we're even recording this, I'll read this to you. We did get an answer from his lawyers. And they said that we are disappointed in the Supreme Court's decision not to review the ruling of the appellate court. We look forward to continuing to fight Mr. Steele's case. What does that mean? I'm not quite sure, because after the Louisiana Supreme Court, not quite sure how much further you can go. Now, malfeasance in office does carry a maximum of a little bit of time behind bars or either a fine. Now, that's what's unclear as to what's actually going to end up happening there, if a sentencing date's going to happen or whatnot. But of course, we're going to continue to keep you updated. So, the other part of this entire investigation is that Judge Rose, she became a very crucial part. So, the judges all pretty much must comply with the Judiciary Commission, that there are certain things that judges must do, certain requirements and principles that they need to uphold. So in this case, the First Circuit Court of Appeal has reversed her ruling, basically saying that you used your discretion in a very wrong way. If you remember what I read you from the ruling, that was one case, y'all. We uncovered numerous cases. There was another case where she was the judge, and there was a woman who the jury actually said that, hey, they sat through an entire trial. The jury came back and said, we don't find enough evidence and we find her not guilty. The entire case is dismissed. The defendants dismissed, the prosecution, everybody is pretty much sent home. And as they're all kind of walking away, they're told to come back to the judge's chambers. So they go back, and it's Judge Rose, Judge Ebony Johnson Rose. They go back to her chambers, and she basically changes the jury's ruling or decision and says, you're now actually guilty. So, long story short, that woman appealed it, and same thing. A higher court ended up reversing the ruling and said that the lady was in the clear. She did nothing wrong. So now this was strike two. Two big cases that a higher court has had to reverse Judge Rose's ruling. Well, going back to that same case, we uncovered that a judge they're required to fill out, the jury is required to fill out these polling slips. If for those of you who have ever sat on a jury, you probably have to fill out, hey, guilty or not guilty. And in this case, those polling slips were never turned into the clerk of court. Where were they last seen? They were seen on the judge's desk. And I'm kind of giving you the summary version of our reporting. Like I've said repeatedly, you can go back and look at our reporting, watch it, go to our website, Unfiltered with Kiran, just type in her name or the officer's name, and we've got a lot more in-depth reporting on this. So those polling slips are never found. And the last time they were ever seen, and this is stuff we learned through our sources, it was on Judge Rose's desk. So at this point, I believe, is when the Judiciary Commission just kind of said, what's going on here? And long story short, she has now been suspended from the bench. She's been suspended, and in fact, the suspension happened to come as she was running to be a judge for the appeal court. Listen to that correctly. She was trying to be a judge on the appeal court, the same court that has repeatedly reversed her rulings. And because of the suspension, the question was, well, can she still legally run for that race? Yes, because the time had lapsed. You have 7 days to withdraw from a race, and after that, you kind of can't. And she didn't want to withdraw. So her name stayed on the ballot. She still ran for a judge for the First Circuit Court of Appeal. She did not win that race.